Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and privilege for me to welcome you all. Doha Bank has always been committed for knowledge sharing, but I could see the terrific response. The hall is overflowing. Today, we have had our International Managers Summit. With the changing face of the world, changing face of the financial service, it was our predicament as a committed vision from the board and execution of the participative leadership of the management. We decided in 2002, when the market becomes global, we go global. Conceptually, we said we will transform this bank in substance to look at destinations where Qatar and the Gulf states have got economic linkage. We will set in our commercial gates. It's not confined to only banking. It is trade, it's investments, it's banking and finance. With this conceptual clarity, we set in our mission with globalization was on, deregulation was on, technology was on, and consumerism was redefining the space. We said Doha Bank will go places. 15 countries we have commercial gates as on date. These are adding value to the region and Qatar in substance in all forms. We all know the world is going through extraordinary reorganization. Last month, I was in Washington for the International Monetary Fund meeting. The policymakers were contentious on deliberating whether the world is still recovering, whether the crisis is over. In my pursuit of profession, in my commitment of wisdom, I see the world at large has to go through the third phase of the financial crisis. Phase one was 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, Bear Stearns collapsed, and public-private partnership was pronounced world over. Financial service was at stake. People started distrusting financial institutions. Clearly, the governing evidence was there for us to see. It has not only infected the United States, it transcended borders, it inflicted every part of the world. Now, Wachovia, Washington Mutual, and again, Northern Rock in England. And Asia was prohibitive in substance because the derivative products was not infecting in total terms. Even real economies were insulated in terms of macroeconomics. They were not isolated from the global financial crisis. Phase two. The policymakers, monetary policy as well as fiscal policy, governors of the central banks as well as the finance ministers started resetting the button in terms of reorganization of the liquidity. What is started as a liquidity has moved into a funding crisis. Funding has become solvency crisis. It became a sovereign crisis. That's precisely the reason in 2011, January, you had Greece was evaporating. In substance, if you look at the bigger picture, quantitative easing was pronounced, accommodative monetary policy, printing money, improving the liquidity, chasing the stock market. Stock markets are all bubbling. Still, quantitative easing is visibly showcased. When you print money, your currency gets weakened. It also exports for you to have value advantage. It's not over there. G7 has become G8, G8 has become G20. Today, still, we are committed in reorganizing the world. Unless you study universal standard in terms of accounting, valuations, securitizations, you are not going to fix the issue. The crisis is still resolvable, measurable, manageable, controllable, provided financial economies are converting as real. Real economies are redefining the scope and performance. United States, still coming to terms. It was August 10 and September 1st week. Clearly, the US Federal Reserve Chairman was possibility of contemplating whether he can unwind the bond buying programs of $85 billion. It was confusion confounded. There was no clear spell out. It was only contemplating options to see whether we can reduce the bond buying. reduced the liquidity. The result was deceleration in the emerging markets. Currencies were depleting. Indian rupee was in a tough phase. Indonesian rupiah was in Thai baht. Chinese yuan was strengthening. Russian ruble was weakening. Brazilian real was weakening. The world at large has to go through, again, high volatile financial market conditions. That's the world we are. Financial markets become gambling grounds. By printing money, you create a currency war. It's not confined to one economy. It's not confined to one country. It's not confined to one continent. World at large is going through currency war, and currency war has stipulated trade war. That's the reflection we have seen. By this time last year, Abenomics was invented. The export becomes highly driven by trillions of dollars of open market operations. Today, Japanese yen, if you look at it, 100 Japanese yen is equal to $1 US. The currency market is going through extraordinary turbulence. Dollar is weakening, dollar index is weakening, the rest of the currencies are strengthening. How do you resolve this dichotomy? How do you measure and manage to convert the financial economies into real? How do you reset the button for real economies who are insulated in terms of macroeconomic fundamentals? How do you ensure commodity-driven economies like Gulf are coming to terms when they have over 20% current account surplus en bloc, 6 states put together, $1.6 trillion, taking oil at $75 per barrel. Today, we are insulated in terms of macroeconomics, but we are not isolated from the global crisis. Why? America has to grow in real terms. It means development expenditure has to be there. Otherwise, not only the trade flows will not be there, banking as a whole will not grow, credit expansion will not take place. It's unemployment, you need to fix it. Again, mutually inclusive principles like you have to inflate the economy and you also have to make sure purchasing power comes in. Consumers spend the money, banks lend the money, then the economy at large will take its own acceleration. Is it happening? It will happen provided you have a fiscal consolidation. It will happen provided you have spending which is required for developments, growth, employment. These are mutually intertwined. If these conditions are accepted, executed politically, economically, if there is a convergence, then you will find America is financially stable and functional. That's the reality. Europe still under pressure. IMF outlook last month, if you look at it, no policymakers were pronouncing that world at large has come out of it. Monetary policy is centralized, fiscal policy is still decentralized. Fiscal union has not been created. Fiscal union requires political union as well. It's not going to happen. Culturally, enlarged Europe, which defies all the logics of Maastricht criteria, has to come to terms. That's the reality. Emerging markets. Look at China. China is slowing down. We're going to talk about trade. We're going to discuss about the global trade. We're going to talk about Qatar trade. The trade will have its significance if there is an acceleration in terms of government expenditure. Export and import has to move up. Government has to pump money in the market. Banks have to lend money. China is slowing down. What is happening in China? 7.8% to 7.5% when it came in the second quarter. I was in July in Shanghai. We have an office in Shanghai as well. Everyone is worried about it. India, as a functional democracy, where gross debt to GDP is just 20%, 37% of the GDP is a savings, growing not less than 9% for 14 consecutive years, is under fiscal consolidation. Current account surplus needs value advantage, but we have to convert the deficit into surplus. Challenge. Inflation outweighs the growth. So there's a new monetary policy breakup and things are shaping up. But we couldn't wither away the storm. The substance is the world at large is still reeling under pressure. Gulf states, as I said, 1.6 trillion. Trillions of dollars of pronouncement of government expenditure. Hospitals, educations, urban development, every single state. Last year alone, if you look at the fiscal framework, $377 billion worth of capital expenditure. Topping the list is, if you look at 1.6 trillion is the breakup of the Gulf states. 720 billion comes from Saudi Arabia. The second state is UAE, United Arab Emirates, with $369 billion. Qatar comes third, $200 billion. Kuwait comes next, $186 billion. Oman comes with $80 billion, and Bahrain comes with $24 billion. Sum it up, you will get 1.6. Government expenditure was driving. What did the fiscal policy was telling? What are the finance ministers were doing? They were committed for government expenditure. They have agreed for improving the airport, seaport, road, rail, education, healthcare. Those are the driving force for the economies. The aggregate growth of the Gulf states should not less than be 5%. That's going to stimulate the overall economic mechanism. If you look at the breakup of $377 billion, it is Saudi Arabia again, topping in the list, $121 billion. 116 is Kuwait. Kuwait is spending money. We have seen tenders are out. Qatar has budgeted $45 billion. $69 billion is coming from, again, UAE. And $24 billion is from Oman, $8 billion from Bahrain. That's a fiscal breakup. It's a huge amount of activity, set in, committed vision. The long-term plannings. Qatar is with 2030. And again, 2022 FIFA is coming up. We're all excited about the prospects we have in tandem. What's happening to the trade in substance? Trade in substance has to move twice the GDP in normal terms. What has happened is atrocious. Developed world, en bloc, is going to grow 1.2%. The trade is going to be less than 2%. Developing world, en bloc is supposed to be 4.6%. The trade is supposed to be around 4%. It doesn't signals there's enough vibration for us to see export and imports are going to shake the world. That's why the currencies are getting manipulated. Currency war is getting created. Printing money is weakening the currency. That's the reality. If you look at the Qatar breakup in terms of trade, it's moving in the right directions. We have 31 billion is the single largest relationship in bilateral terms for Qatar, that is Japan. Doha Bank has got an office. Second largest is Korea, South Korea, $21 billion. Doha Bank has got an office. And again, the third is India, $17 billion, nearing $17 billion, 16 plus. That's moving in the right direction in terms of export of LNG from here. That's the breakup. In terms of import, Qatar is doing from the United States to the rest of the countries. By and large, the GCC import and export is in the right directions, 5 to 6% again. It's not deviant from the GDP growth, but it's not what you want. If you have to stimulate global growth, if you have to stimulate global trade, if you have to stimulate global investments, if you have to stimulate global banking, you need reorganization in the world. We live in an interconnected, interdependent world. Our intention is to deliberate today, bringing the experts from multiple disciplines and looking at the possibility of how to improve the trade, Qatar trade relationships, how to intensify your trade finance support, how to intensify the trade flows in multiple form and substance. Today, we have lined up speakers who are responsive with absolute meritocracy. These speakers have the illustrious career as well as substance in terms of their functional responsibility. I'm delighted to welcome them. I'm delighted to welcome you all for these wonderful, wonderful knowledge sharing sessions thereafter for the dinner. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention.